This video is about how to repair scratched oak flooring, pre-finished oak flooring in the middle of a wood floor. We're going to take a circular saw. We're going to set the blade depth to 3/4 of an inch. We're going to have to do a plunge cut. Plunge cut means that I put the front of the saw on the wood, I raise the back up, and I apply a little bit of forward motion while I'm pressing the saw blade into the wood. You got to be very careful of kickback. If you're not comfortable, don't do it. There's the cut. Now this is a nifty little tool from Harbor Freight. I think they're about $19. Circular saw doesn't complete the cut all the way because it is round, and so I'm using this tool, multi-tool, to finish the cut. I'm being careful only to cut through the 3/4 inch of wood floor to the substrate, or in this case the subfloor. I'm going to make a 90-degree T-cut, if you will, because we're going to use that to pop this board out. I'm being careful to keep that 3/4 of an inch. I don't want to go too deep. I don't want to go into the subfloor. A little bit, not so bad. Too much, not so good. Now it is a pre-finished floor, and that means that everything I do has to be very careful. Speaking about careful, here while I'm lifting up this board, I have to be very careful because the adjoining board in front of this one does have a tongue and a groove, and if I'm not careful, I can crack the board, the good piece, the good board that I don't want to remove. So I'm being very careful how I apply pressure, making sure I don't put too much rapid pressure and then crack the other board, and that means I've got a bigger job and have to replace another board. So it's a little bit of caution. All flooring has a tongue and a groove on 4 sides, 2 tongues and 2 grooves, and it's held together with mechanical fasteners and with the tongue and groove system, which is very strong. And that's why it's so difficult to replace a piece of wood in the middle of a floor. So that's why you're seeing some extra techniques. Here again, I'm cutting a T so that I can take this piece out a little bit more carefully. I don't want to be applying a whole lot of pressure on a board at one time. Now once you get the first piece out, the next pieces are going to be a lot easier to take out. And since we cut this board in half, it makes it much more easy. I'm using a block of wood there to get some leverage so I don't damage the board in front. Pop it out. Now here's the thing. I'm going to cut another board out. This time this board is probably about 6 feet long, but I don't want to cut a 6-foot long board out. That's a lot of work. So I'm going to make a splice. I'm keeping at least 3 inches away from any joint. I don't want to have 2 joints, one on top of the other, one next to each other. They should overlap by about 3 inches. Here I am cleaning up the joint. Often when you do this method, you might leave a tongue, you might leave a little bit of slag, some wood material splinters. You want to clean all of that out because when you drop the new board in, it couldn't interfere with it properly seating. So that's what we're doing here. You also notice that we remove the tar paper. Tar paper does 2 services. It helps with the moisture content, keeps the too much moisture from getting into the oak flooring, and it helps with the squeak when you're walking on the floor. So that's in our case, we're going to be applying glue to the substrate and to the back of the new pieces of wood that we're going to be applying. So the new boards are going to be held together primarily with glue. Now I will at some point put 1 nail on the surface just to get a mechanical connection, then I'll fill that hole up. Alright, again, we're doing this plunge cut. We're cutting this next piece out. This is sort of a repeat of what we did earlier. Pay attention. We're completing the cut. Now we're going to do a T-cut. Now once you've gotten one piece out, it's much easier. Now these 2 ends, the left and the right side, I have to be very careful because I want to get those perfectly square. I don't want to have those at an angle, because if I'm having an angle, it's going to be hard to chop saw the next board and fit it into it. They have to be both square. Here it is. We've popped out 1/2, got out the other half. Now it's time to measure the new boards. I like to just take the new board and put it into the space, and with my eye very carefully mark the actual length of the board. It's a little bit more accurate than using a tape measure. As long as you're watching parallax, that your eye is directly over the line and you're not looking at it at an angle. Here I'm going to go ahead and cut the tar paper out. We're going to clean up. We're going to actually vacuum. I'll end up vacuuming up the subfloor because I don't want any particles. And that's more or less how it should look. Again, chipping out any debris, anything we see. All right, getting ready to chop. I've measured the board. I know what side of the line to cut it on. Now I'm cutting off the tongue. That was the tongue I cut off because we're not going to be able to use that tongue because we've got no groove to slide it in. Here, this is, we've set the saw blade just a little bit, about 3/8 of an inch. We want to cut one. This is the groove side of the board, and we're going to cut one of the parts of the groove off. Now the top part, the finished part, remains, but the part that slides in, we can't slide the tongue in the groove anymore, so it has to actually just go in straight. There's not enough room. Here I'm checking the moisture content just to see how my new boards, well, the new boards are actually boards that were up in my attic and they were not in a controlled environment. Here I think I get a reading of about 8 moisture content on the subfloor, and I couldn't get anything on the old floor, and I had about a 3% on the new floor, so there is a little bit of difference. Why that matters is that if the boards that you're placing in there have absorbed too much moisture, they're going to be too wide, and you're going to have another, that's a different trouble when you try to fit it in. And even though I might trim it down to make it fit, when it dries, it'll dry, the board will actually shrink, and you'll see a big gap around the board. So that's why moisture content is important, and they recommend that once you take your finished floor, that you actually leave it in the environment and let it acclimate. Oftentimes you have to acclimate it for a week or 2 weeks to let the moisture content acclimate to the environment that it's going to be placed into. Now I'm being very careful, making a nice square cut. Circular saw is a little bit quicker, a little bit more accurate than using that the other tool. At least I started with the circular saw, but then I'll complete it because of the accuracy with the hand tool. Now I've just gone ahead and I've split this. I've also cut that. Notice that I cut the tongue off. I'm being very careful here again because on the left side there still is a tongue attached to it, so I don't want to apply a whole lot of pressure. So I'm going to be a little bit extra careful. I'm going to pop that piece out, and I'm going to push this other one out of the way, and that way I don't have any risk. Now I'm just dry fitting that board. Now there's a tongue. We don't have a groove that it's going to fit into because it's a square cut. So that's why we cut that tongue off. All right, so let's go ahead. This is PVA glue, also known as carpenter's glue or white glue. This is an old bottle that I had, so it's a little bit more gummy. Normally it would be white and it would flow very easily. Again, I'm using up what I have. I'm also coating all surfaces. I'm coating not only the floor, the substrate, but I'm also coating the edges, and I'm going to coat the edges on the boards, the new boards that I'm popping into place. I want to have some good adhesion. Here, I'm going to go ahead and put in a flooring nail. I take a drill, and I at a 45-degree angle, and now I've taken, it's about a 2 1/4 inch flooring nail. It's spiraled, finished nail, and I'm being careful as I'm getting close to finishing that I don't want to mar the end of the good board. So I'm going to use a punch. In my case, I'm just using a screwdriver just to set the nail below the surface so that when I put my new board in, it doesn't interfere with it sitting in. Normally speaking, we would have two systems of attaching a floor. One would be with flooring nails, and the other system is with the tongue and the groove. So it's a pretty stout, pretty aggressive system once it's all put together. And you can see where I've cut the there. I'm going to not only am I going to cut the half of that groove away, I'm also going to sand the board about a 1/16 of an inch, maybe a 32nd of an inch narrower. I would say try 32nd of an inch. 1/16 is too much, so that it pops in place. And there it is. It's nice and tight. Rechecking all the surfaces. I put it on the groove, I put it on the tongue, and I'm also going to do the same with the board that I'm going to be dropping in place. I want to have good adhesion. There it is. I put, yeah, see, I could go ahead and put one more nail in. Now I'm going to, everything is in place, pounded it all, it's nice and flat. That pencil mark on the last board I put in will just wash off. So that's not a big concern. There, it's still not going in, so I'm going to have to